So the allowing quadrant. Loads of fun, this one. Well, they all are. The allowing quadrant is the intersection between the done to half of the circle and the giving half of the circle. What you are giving, the gift that you're giving in the allowing quadrant is access to you. In the allowing quadrant, you're doing two things. One is that you set aside what you prefer and you keep your responsibility for having a limit to how much you can give and are willing to give. Limits are about this far and no farther, or I can give you this, I can't give you that, or I'm willing to participate in this, I'm not willing to participate in that. That's the nature of having a limit. Some people call that a boundary. So in allowing, you get to explore your responsibility for having a limit to what you're willing to give. And what you find is that when you take full responsibility for that, then you become very generous and you relax and you enjoy and you go with the flow. And that is exactly the crux and the key to having a lot of fun and play and surrender in the allowing role. Another way of saying that is that the degree to which you are confident that you have a choice about what happens to you, and you really know that all the way into your bones, to that degree you can be generous. If you're not really quite sure, then there's no way to be generous because you're on guard, as well you should be. The taking quadrant is difficult for almost everybody. It's just a matter of degree. The allowing quadrant is all over the map. It can be completely easy and natural, like falling off a log, and it can be a little challenging and confusing, and it can be absolutely terrifying. And what makes the difference is what we just said, the confidence that you have a choice about what happens to you. And the reason I say confidence is because you probably know in your head that you have a choice about what happens to you. If you don't, what are you doing in the same room with this person? So you probably know in your head that, yeah, I have a choice about what happens to me. But you have to know it in your body, and you have to know it in the midst of the flow of what's happening. So that's why I say confidence. It's a feeling more than it is a knowing in your head. And to the degree that you really get that, again, that's the degree to which you relax and enjoy allowing, and to which you become generous in allowing. There's one key factor that affects every experience of being touched. And I talked about this back in the done to half of the circle. And that is that we have all been touched against our will in ways that we did not want and we did not like. And that this happened before we could walk and talk. That means that it's very deep in our nervous system. It's not particularly conscious usually, and it's very deep in our psyche, sort of our assumptions about the nature of being touched. And to a large degree, it just feels like the normal state of things. Something's done to me, or I'm touched, and therefore I have to kind of figure out how to like it or how to be okay with it. And that assumption is not usually a conscious process, but it shows up. I've seen it countless times, and I've been there myself, countless times in how people respond to being touched and how they communicate about being touched. So in the allowing quadrant, what you get to explore and sort of experiment with yourself is, what is it that is within the range or the limit of what I'm willing and happy to give? And what is it that I'm not really so happy to give, and how much responsibility do I take for that? So that's what you get to play with in the allowing role. And gosh, I'd make it sound sort of dismal, but it's really fabulously fun when you really get it that you have a choice. Because then you can surrender and you can go with the flow, and I'll come back to that in a moment, but it's a lot of fun. So here's an example of that principle and what often happens. This was with a client that I had who was a man in his mid-60s or so, and he had very little experience with women and in relationship, and was just pretty much terrified of all intimacy, and that's why he was coming to me to get some help. And I'm teaching him the game, and we're going through the different steps, and after 3 or 4 sessions, we're exploring each of them. And this day, it's his turn to be in the allowing role. So I give him instructions. What you say to me now is, how would you like to touch me? He's supposed to say that to me. And he gets very tense and scared, and you know how you are when you sort of build up your courage. Okay, ready? I think I can do this, so he's like, okay, ready? I think I can do this. Okay, he's really getting up his courage to say so, and he says, okay, do whatever you want. And that was a big aha moment for me, because I realized that that's what he thought the question was. And I, obviously we talked about that. But he wasn't even able to hear the words, how would you like to touch me? All the whole concept of it in his mind was, do whatever you want. And no wonder it was terrifying, because that means that I don't have any choice about what happens to you. Just do whatever you want. So that was a big aha for me that day, and it showed me that dynamic shows up lots of times, and certainly I've been in that place, that perhaps not to that extreme, but the same dynamic shows up, that you forget that you have a choice and you get to have a limit. Not only do you get to have a limit, you have a responsibility to have a limit, and that's your responsibility and nobody else's. So that's the allowing quadrant. There's a big fallacy that shows up here in the allowing quadrant. And that is that people will say this: you should trust your partner. They're not trying to hurt you. They're trying to be good to you. So therefore, you should trust them. And what I always want to ask is, trust them to do what? Read my mind? They can't do that. The implication that you should automatically trust your partner is completely backwards. Not because you think your partner's going to do you harm. If you think they're going to do you harm, get out of the room. Not because you don't trust them to have good intentions, but because the person you need to trust is yourself, to take responsibility for your limits. The idea that you should trust them is trying to tell you that you should stop being responsible for yourself and hope that the other guy figures out what it is that your limits are or what you want. And that is completely backwards. So the idea that, oh no, you should just trust your partner is perilously close to you should stop taking responsibility for yourself. And none of us really need any more encouragement to do that, I don't think. We already know how to go along with stuff we don't want. We don't need to practice that anymore. So then, how do you get really good at the allowing quadrant so that it's fun and easy and generous? The answer is that you start small and you start slow. And that's what the lessons do for you. When you make your partner the offer, how would you like to touch me? And they say, I would like to play with your hair or feel your hands or feel your legs or whatever it is. Then you take a pause. And if you're in my studio, we use a timer, and I make sure you take at least 20 seconds to pause and notice, is this something that I can give with a full heart? And you wait for that resounding inner yes. And if you do have some resistance or you feel tension, you have an unanswered question. And that's either an unanswered question that you need to ask your partner, which is something like this: I'm not sure. Can you tell me more about what you have in mind and what you'd like? Because there may be some detail that you don't know. Or you need to ask yourself a question. The question is not, what's wrong with me that I can't give this thing? The question is, what is within my range of what I am a resounding yes for? And that's a very different question. So if you feel resistance to what they're asking for, those are the two things to ask yourself. Either ask them for more information or ask yourself, what is it that I actually would be happy to give? And when you ask for that yourself, when you ask yourself that, you wait until you know, and then you feel your body, okay, then you feel that inner resounding yes, and then it is a great joy to give that. So that's what makes the allowing quadrant easy and fun and quite wonderful, is the distinction between acquiescing and truly giving a gift. And to truly give a gift, you have to own that gift before you can give it. So you have to own your responsibility, and then you can give access to yourself. So the allowing quadrant is then where you learn that the ability to say no is actually the key to intimacy of any kind. If you can't say no, you really can't afford to be in the same room with anyone, because stuff's just going to happen and you're going to go along with it. So when you can say no and own your limits, then you can become actually very, very close. And that's a surprising key to intimacy. So what's some of the erotic elements to the allowing role? The allowing role is the star in romance novels. This is where, she is so beautiful that he can't help himself and he ravishes her and she surrenders to the bliss. Okay, that's the allowing role. So what happens in the allowing role is that this is the desire to be desired. This is where you get to experience your partner's desire for you and to surrender to that. To surrender to you're surrendering your sort of micromanagement, which is a great freedom, and surrender to your partner's desire. A lot of fun with that. And again, it's the ability to do that is based on you trusting yourself. And in order for you to trust yourself, you have to gain those skills of taking responsibility for yourself. That's the order that it happens. So a lot of fun, a lot of eros in the allowing role. For some people, just being in the allowing role at all feels wonderful and feels erotic, because that sort of can be a theme for us sometimes. What you also find in the allowing role, the taking allowing dynamic, is that this is where you can notice, if you play with it a while, that you have the opportunity to play with the exchange of power. That in this dynamic, the taking partner has the power, and you are sort of handing over that power temporarily. You've made that decision based on your empowered choice, but then in the experience, you just get to sort of hand over your power, and that can be a lot of fun to play with. And is the basis for a whole field of ways to play with power and surrender. And what does the allowing role have to do with gender? If you've watched the other videos, you already know this. It has nothing to do with gender. Every single person of whatever sex you are, whatever gender you are, you need some time in the allowing role. And if it's challenging for you, then this is where the real learning is and where the real freedom is. It's interesting that both men and women can have a lot of erotic charge here and also have a lot of fear and resistance here, because men, they're supposed to be in charge, so why should they want to go here? And yet the highest paid sex workers are quite often those women who take men deeply into these surrendered states with a great deal of skill, because they want to have that experience. And for women, also can be very sweet and have a lot of erotic charge, and it can often also be embarrassing, because it smacks of being used in the old sort of sexist ways of approaching sex. So, I don't want to be thought of as being submissive. However, we all have that ability to enjoy the surrender, and so this is where you find it. So what it has to do with gender is nothing. So what about the muddy mess at the edge of the allowing quadrant, where you're kind of going along with it, but it's really not very inspiring, and it's not much heart in it because you really don't know what else to do. It just feels normal. It feels like this is the nature of being touched, is that you just sort of go along with stuff. Not a happy place to be, although many people spend their entire lives there. So in that muddy place, what's most likely happening is either the taker, the person in the taking role, your partner, is being a little presumptive or a little pushy or a little unaware or didn't ask, or you in the allowing role are not taking responsibility for yourself. It's usually a combination of those. And what happens then is that you become resentful, either immediately or it's gradually builds up over time. Not a happy place to be. It also, you become very dulled and bored with the whole thing because there's no heart in it, there's no flow in it. So what about when the allowing role is difficult for you? What happens? What that means is that you don't have that confidence that you have a choice, and you haven't taken responsibility for your limits that we talked about. And when that happens, you kind of have a couple of choices. Either you just go along with everything and you become the doormat, in which case you get bored and resentful, or you put up a very strong guard and just don't want to do anything. Or you have to sort of micromanage what happens because you can't really afford to get out of this very careful step-by-step approach because you don't really know how to go with the flow. What also happens is that everyone becomes a little suspect. If you don't know how to say no and have a limit, then everybody looks selfish to you. And they may or may not be, but they sure look that way to you because you don't know how to say no. So that's what happens when the allowing role is difficult for you. When it's easy and you really get that ownership of your limits and your responsibility for yourself, then there's a great deal of joy in the flow of surrender, and that, it's the going with the flow. It's the positive aspect of going with the flow. What also happens is that you enjoy surprises. You kind of get your sea legs under you, as it will, so that as things change, you can change with them. And you become comfortable in a wide variety of situations, both sexual situations, social situations, and you develop a high respect for other people's desires. You don't have to be afraid of their desires because you own your limits. So there is a spiritual principle at play here in allowing as well, and that is surrender. In the 3-minute game, obviously, we're playing with a very tangible surrender to your partner's desire. That also can lead you to experiences of exquisite surrender to God, to the universe, to forces larger than yourself, surrendering to bliss. One spiritual path calls this radiant acquiescence. And that surrender is a spiritual path all its own, and you get a taste of it here in the allowing role. What's also possible in the allowing role, as you're playing with it over time and as you gain trust in yourself, is that when you do this for an extended period of time, you can enter some profoundly blissful states that are just sensually and emotionally exquisite. So there's another aspect to the allowing quadrant, which I think of as social, for lack of a better word, and that is that when we take responsibility to not allow other people to treat us unfairly or unjustly, we stand up and say, no, I will not participate in this. I will not allow you to harm me. Or I will not allow you to harm these other people. So that could happen as an individual, it could happen as a group, and this is where we develop the ability to stand up against injustice and oppression. Basically, it's where we say, no, you don't get to hurt these people, you don't get to treat people this way. And it stops right here. That is that beautiful line around the allowing quadrant that just says, nope, you don't get to do that. I think of that often when I'm thinking about social justice issues. That comes from this place right here. So that's the allowing role. Lots of fun. Very erotic, also very playful. And again, start small. Start with just exploring your hands and your forearms like it's in the lessons on this page. And know that as you explore it, you will make some mistakes. That's guaranteed. And you'll come back and you'll question yourself, oof, I didn't really want to do that. And then the next time you'll be more clear. That's going to happen. So enjoy. Have a good time playing with it.